Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah, and I welcome you to this session today, Building Your Career as a Sales Development Leader. We have with us the great James Barton from Venify. James has had a rocket ship career in sales development and is generously going to share some of what he's learned along the way. Just as a reminder, the session is being recorded. Feel free to use the chat feature and the Q&A. James will try to get to questions towards the end of the session. So if you have anything, go ahead and set that in the Q&A. And with that being said, I'll hand it over to James. James, thank you very much.
Thanks, Hannah. Appreciate the intro. And thanks, everybody, for joining. And a big thank you to the Tenbound team for allowing me this opportunity to present today. I'm here to chat about building your career as a sales development leader. It's definitely something that I'm passionate about. I've made a career of, and hopefully some of this stuff that we'll cover will be useful or resonate or helpful down the road. So quick agenda of who I am. I'll do that really quickly because I'm kind of boring in comparison to what's out there in the slides. Some guy called the big three takeaways I've learned in my career path. Alignment of SDR teams, recommendations that I've always given to newer kind of architects of SDR teams or younger, newer SDR teams in general. Breakdown of the function, or what I like to call predictability engines. Partnerships, they are really key, whether you're an SDR or an SDR leader. Partnerships, regardless of what role you're in, really are important to be successful, and kind of wrap up from there. So jumping in, my name is James Barton. I work for a cybersecurity firm called Venify that specializes in a sector of cybersecurity called machine identity management. Happy to chat about that in more detail, if anybody wants to connect and chat more. But I started off in 2006 as an SDR working for a company called Success Factors that later on was acquired by SAP. When a sales development rep, went into sales, went back to sales development, and really found that sales development was my calling. I loved it, passionate about it, and I've kind of, just been pursuing it ever since. Always been a student of the craft. So, can you hear me okay? I got it. Okay, I'll speak a little louder. Great, thanks. All right, so I live my life by a few rules. Number one is something I learned at the first stop in technology is, and I apologize for the fruity language, the no asshole rule. For me, culture is king/queen. It is the foundation of what I think a successful SDR team really needs to have in place. Because if you don't have a good foundational culture, you will have people moaning and groaning and really not happy about getting out of bed on Mondays, let alone any day they come to work. So make sure as a leader or a future leader, you keep that in mind. And there's just so much you can do as a leader, but what you want to do is bring people in to add and build that culture with you. You're kind of like the architect, so you got to bring in your team members to help build that structure up. Because you create a good culture, you actually build more momentum, more success, and everybody makes a little bit more money and is a lot happier when they come to work. So the big three for me, what I like to call the big three, are three areas of focus where I'm constantly learning. And I would encourage any SDR leader to never stop learning in. One is people. And I use the image on the left-hand side for those of you who are fans of The Office. Michael Scott is not the greatest leader in the world, but he does have these gems of advice. And one of the things that I really, really think taking away from this really funny episode was I invest in people like Michael Scott does, because people never go out of business. And the more you invest in people and members of your team and even your business partners, the more value that you all get out of. It creates trust and it creates a true partnership. So try to always be the manager you and your team has never had, because one, it's an unattainable goal, but at the same time, you're constantly being better than you were the day before. Secondly, problem solving. For me, I like to break down problems, whether they're small or big, or even creating sales development models by starting at the end, working backwards, identifying the milestones, and reverse engineering how to get to those goals. I'll get to more detail on that a little bit later on. But the third of the big three is make sure everybody has a voice. Sales development reps traditionally have been overlooked to have a strong voice or have a good opinion. They're just entry level, they'll be okay. But make sure that your team, every single team member on that team, has a voice to not only share what they're experiencing, make sure that everybody has that voice to you, but also you all as a team have a voice to the rest of the organization. So if you have that, you'll be that much stronger. The culture will benefit. The people and partnerships you're working with will be that much more benefited as well. Rule number two, I kind of touched on it already. It's actually a lesson I learned from my mom. She once told me when I was growing up, I'm like, why are you such a cool mom? She goes, because I wanted to be the parent I never had. So the idea is that, yes, it is an unattainable goal, but it commits you to always chasing that unattainable goal to always be better than you were yesterday, but not as good as we will be tomorrow. Another lesson that was kind of confirmed back when I started as an SDR at Success Factors in 2006, it was an amazing culture. And it all started on these two rules that we kind of lived our lives by. And I've pretty much lived my life by ever since I was a kid. When it comes to SDR alignment, so there's a lot of debate as to where SDRs should align as far as the departments or the teams they should roll up to. And personally, if you ask me, I don't care. We're here to get a job done, do it successfully, do it better and better month after month, quarter after quarter, and so on. But if people really kind of put pressure on me, I will always recommend it starts with the culture of the company first. And that's where you kind of go for there. And that's how you align the sales development teams. Because there's three teams that I really feel as though can be aligned with where the SDR goals go, right? So sales operations, and marketing. Today, my team and I roll up through the marketing organization within Benify, and it's a wonderful alignment. I have no complaints whatsoever, and we're really successful aligning with not only the marketing goals, but also the sales goals. But I started off my career as a sales development team member rolling up through the sales operations department. And it was kind of viewed back then that sales ops, like sales development, is kind of like this bridge between sales and marketing where we align with both teams or both departmental goal sets. So for us, it was great because we knew what the alignment was, we knew what the targets were, we knew how to influence change, we knew the levers were to pull and push to be able to make sales and marketing as happy as possible. So this is in order, but again, loose, and you have to approach it no matter what company you're in to the culture and the goals of the organization, as well as the customer base you're focused on. Because if you're in an enterprise account-based sales organization like we have at Benify, there's always a debate, and marketing is a great place to be. But if there's other organizations that have different alignment, maybe sales or sales operations could be the best fit. So out of the box, sales, their goals pretty much align with the sales development reps' goals. We're here to find pipeline through appointments and uncovering new sales cycles to pursue. Sales operations, like I said, it's kind of the bridge between sales and marketing. So there's a kind of a similar DNA or cut from a similar cloth, so to speak, where those success metrics are really black and white in the sales operations world. And that's essentially where I think sales development teams thrive, is having those very black and white linear goals to align to both marketing and sales goals to end up with what the end result is pipeline that turns into revenue. With marketing, because marketing's job is to influence leading indicators that eventually turn into pipeline, it's a great option as well for sales development teams to align to, because we are tightly bound to the goal of generating pipeline for our end customer, sales. So when it comes down to this, it's also always a situation depending upon the company, the goals, the alignment, where they want to get to next. But it's always a debate because it's not a standard key turn kind of thing where every key is the same for every company. It's obviously different based upon the DNA. So third rule, something I learned when I was a kid, and I still think it's kind of funny, but it is relevant. I am what I am, and that's all that I am. As budding sales development leaders are trying to figure out what their management style is, what they're going to kind of drive their future teams into, it's true. You cannot be beyond who you are, right? You are who you are. But if you go beyond and try to be someone you're not, it's going to come through to the people who report to you like you're faking it and you're full of it. So if you try to evolve as a leader naturally through your own personality, intelligence, where you want to go, but also the fact that you are still a team member, you work for your team, not the other way around. And if you're humble, you're unselfish, you always do go the extra mile for your team, I mean, they will love it, appreciate it, trust you, and be that much more driven for the results. Case in point, we were in California for a marketing all hands in person event late last year. And when I was presenting, I put my org chart upside down. And when people were like, your slide's upside down, I'm like, actually, it's not, because I work for my managers. My managers work for the individual contributors in the front lines, because that is truly how I personally focus my time for my team. So this is a little bit more complicated of a slide. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but this is kind of how I touched on it earlier about breaking down the process to create a predictability engine. So you take all the complexities out of it, you break it down to the milestones of the sales cycle, but you work backwards. So you find out, what's the goal? Bookings and revenue. Where does that come from? And where does that come from? And where does that come from? So you find those milestones, and within those milestones, you identify the key moments where SDRs have the most amount of influence and should be rewarded / paid for the right behaviors. So a lot of places will start off early stages with sales development teams models being just appointment based or just opportunity based, but then evolve to the next step of appointment and opportunity based. But I truly feel the real power, the real superpower really of a sales development team comes into play after the new sales cycles have been identified, especially in an enterprise and strategic kind of scenario where, if for those of us who've been put to sleep by these big, massive sales books we've been forced to read over the years, we know that in any big sales cycle, there's upwards of 10 to 20 to 30 people involved, every decision makers, influencers, end users, everybody. And if the sales rep is working in partnership closely with their SDR, not only to get their foot in the front door, but go off and find those ICPs or ideal customer personas profiles to bring back to the sales rep. Not only can we disqualify non-ideal sales cycles quicker, but we can advance those early stage sales cycles that much faster into mid and late stage, solidify the pipeline, and make sure we're rewarding the SDRs for their right behaviors, but also make our internal customers, sales reps, that much happier of advancing those opportunities faster. So again, it all goes back to the very beginning of the true alignment between SDRs and AEs, which we can get into questions at the end if you want. But when it comes down to it, it is that partnership that starts working backwards from that end goal, finding those milestones, and making sure that you're capturing that information, pulling that information apart, pulling those complexities out as, okay, why is that SDR that much more successful than the other? Is it inbound? Is it outbound? Is it that many phone calls, emails, whatever it may be? But having the foundation of breaking down the process first to create the actual engine is what matters most. It's kind of like a car. Car doesn't go anywhere if it's just an engine. You got to build the complexity of the car around the engine after you've built the engine. So this is kind of a cheeky sort of slide that I present and people laugh, kind of shake their head at, but it's kind of an easy representation of the way I view SDRs and the AE / account manager relationships. They are partners, right? So Chewbacca, Han Solo, they are partners in the story of Star Wars, where, traditionally speaking, SDRs have been looked at as a sidekick, like Batman and Robin. But the thing is, when it comes to sales development reps and their partners, as they move into a sales development leadership role, those partnership kind of ideals shouldn't change. Your partners just change roles. So you go from individual sales reps to sales leaders and departmental leaders, and you're going beyond the borders of just the AE SDR relationship. You're now going to SDR leadership to sales operations, marketing operations, finance, procurement, whatever it may be, even partnerships in the channel. So when it comes down to partnerships, it truly is a two-way street. It's not a, hey, jump on the bandwagon sidekick. But when it comes down to it, yes, it is a cheesy analogy, but the more that you lean in on the fact, okay, you're in a new role as a leader, you're not an individual contributor, you now need to partner with everybody internally to enable yourself, your team, and any goodness you can build within those partnerships. So And I think, yeah, I went pretty quickly. Was that? I think we got a little bit of time left. If there's any questions. All right, so I got a question from. Oh, Hannah, are you going to organize the questions, or should I go for it in the chat?
Oh, I was just getting myself back on stage.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I can ask
Yeah,
the
yeah.
questions. There was one about how do you work with AE leadership to correctly enable the SDR AE partnership to be effective?
That's a really good question because I've done this a number of times where, first and foremost, it's important to have relationships with the sales reps. You don't have to meet with them all the time, but just make sure that you are not just some person on top of a mountain pointing the finger and dictating, right? Also making sure, and this is something I've done a couple times at Venify, is go around globally and make sure you meet with all teams so they understand how SDRs are compensated, what success looks like, and make sure you provide recommended agendas for their mandatory weekly one-on-ones. It doesn't have to be a full hour, but it should be a mandatory weekly connect to strategize on what's happened, what's about to happen, what needs to happen, what next steps, and who's going to cover what past interest was around, and how to revisit that. But it starts with relationships with the partners and making sure that everybody understands how to do that. But when it comes down to the relationship between the sales rep and an SDR, that's up to them, right? It is an organic thing, and I truly firmly believe that you cannot force relationships. They have to be organic, and some people just don't get along. So if you have to realign it down the road, exhaust all options to make sure those partnerships work, okay, no problem. But that is my last move that I would ever want to do, because if you start doing that, you lose momentum in territories or account lists. And then whoever is the new SDR has to start all over with that momentum and building upon it. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah. Cool. I think there was another question about how much follow-up, what would you identify as too much following up? And then as some background, the question asker said, I'm an AE in the ed tech industry where pipelines move very slow. So I guess just if you want to talk about industry differences or something there.
Sure, I'll do it in two categories: follow up and then industry. So follow up is a tough category to answer briefly or quickly. Follow up, if it's inbound, there is a recommended, I say 15 touches max of a mix of phone call, email, LinkedIn, smoke signal, carrier pigeon, whatever you want. But end of the day, before you even click the button to follow up or reach out to somebody or respond to a lead, you have to have the customer experience in mind first. Because I've been sold to. I don't like being sold to. And that was kind of my drive when it came to being an SDR, calling into the state of Michigan in 2009 when everybody was going out of business. And I would call people like, I just laid off 17,000 people. You don't want to be like, hi, I want to buy my product, right? So you have to make sure that the way that you're creating that experience is good. So if you don't like getting 15 touches from an SDR in your own world, don't do it. Or make sure you customize that touch based upon what you believe is the right kind of touch. People like to talk to people on the phone. They don't like getting emails anymore as much because you get hundreds of emails every day. But it's all about experience. And the best way of having a good customer experience is in person. Can't really do that these days. Second best, like this on video, which obviously it's kind of hard to do without them agreeing to an appointment at that time. But the phone, it's a really good resource because like I used to joke that like I could get into an argument with you today and walk away, and I'd ask you an innocent question the next morning, and you might think that I'm in the same mood when we were in an argument the day before. So if you hear my tone, my pitch, my personality, it's far more valuable than in text form. But when it comes down to it, you got to break it down to what you're defining as follow-up, what types of follow-up it is. You really don't need to follow up that many times with somebody who had past interest and the deal didn't go anywhere. Maybe 2-3 times. Maybe it's a full nurture campaign. Maybe it's just sending articles every once in a while. But the idea is that keep that customer experience as the number one priority. When it comes to actual industries, ed tech is tough. I've done it before too. I've sold to it. It's a slow mover, but it is a giant cash cow if you're able to penetrate in there. And it's just, the ironic part is the SLED world has far more money than the Fed world. And that's something we're digging into at Venify too, is that we are identifying that, leaning in on that, and the fact that everybody is now remote. It's that much more important to understand that audience that much more effectively. When it comes to follow up with those individuals, it's been a little while, but I'd say again, even more so, make it about the customer experience. Don't make those emails and those messages too long. Don't try to tell them what they need. Ask them what they need. Ask them if this could be a good fit, and if so, great, keep going. If not, okay, great, made a new connection, and let's follow up down the road if there's anything. But it's kind of a generic answer, and I apologize. But when it comes down to it, you can't go square peg round hole. It has to be the right fit, and make sure that they feel like they're getting a good experience with what they're being communicated to. So
okay, thanks. Another question came in.
Uh-oh. I lost audio. Oh, there we go.
Sorry.
No
what advice do you have to increase the rate at which customers show up to appointments with the AE/closer?
There's a number of things. We've tried everything from a third-party kind of gifting platform, like here's a cup of coffee on us in advance, or if you take time with us, thanks so much. Making sure your SDR maybe follows up casually, not aggressively, but casually, to make sure that they have everything they need for the upcoming appointment. And make sure it's also a good use of time. The other thing is the more that they provide to you, they are more psychologically committed to your event coming up, whether it's a one-on-one scenario or an actual big group event. So if they're providing more information, make sure you put it into the agenda. Make sure you are make everybody who's about to join is as informed and up to date what is about to take place. But when it comes down to it, it's up to them, right? They have to click the button to join the meeting or walk into the office to join the meeting. So if something happens, they don't show up, reach out to them, be like, hey, sorry, we missed you. Hope we can reschedule. Hope everything's okay, right? You can't assume the worst, like, oh, they just didn't want to show up. Their dog may have gotten hit by a car, or, their loved one may have gotten promoted and they're celebrating a little too long, 10 minutes ago. So give them the benefit of the doubt. But, when it comes down to it, just there are easy things, follow up, make sure there's a little incentive or a gift to, if you really want to go the extra mile. And also make sure if they can't accept gifts on a corporate level, they make sure you give them the option to make a donation in their name as well. So.
Great, thank you. I think saw one other question come in, diving a little deeper into another question around alignment with sales. How frequently do you suggest meeting with sales VPs, AVPs, and what are some of the key metrics that you're always discussing?
Yeah, good question. So I meet with my RVPs every 2 weeks, but I have the managers meet with the RVPs every week. For me, it's more along the lines of taking data. We use Tableau for our BI, and it's really valuable because it can show a little bit deeper comparison of ratios between success metrics that Salesforce is not quite there yet. Good thing they bought Tableau, right? But have a visual ready for those one-on-ones when you do meet with department or regional leaders, excuse me, because visuals are more universally understood, and you can find more questions than just providing a spreadsheet or data points. Because with BI, if the filters are set up, you can manipulate it and dig deeper into the information weeds. And it can start spawning more questions that you may not have had when you first joined those meetings. But I would always say have an agenda set, have a mutually agreed upon agenda set for when you do meet with the regional VPs, because their time is incredibly valuable. They're trying to advance pipeline into revenue, and if you show up and just kind of shoot the proverbial shit, then there's not a good use of time for either of you. Always have a point, always have an agenda, and if you don't need to use the time, make sure you give it back.
That makes sense. Thanks. I think we're at time and there's no more questions. So if we want to just wrap up, and I'd like to thank you on behalf of Tenbound for sharing all your wisdom with us today. And everyone, make sure there's lots of more sessions coming up, and enjoy. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Anna.